friends and followers. This is Jenn Espinosa-Goswami coming to you live from, oh my God, I just realized there's 1 second. Oh, that's rather embarrassing. Anyway, so obviously I'm coming to you from my room because I had some clothes hanging up there. And that was one of my unmentionables, so I apologize for that. That was super embarrassing. But today I'm going live today instead of Friday, which is my normal live stream day, because this Friday I'm hosting a workshop in the Minneapolis area. So if you're in the Minneapolis area and you're like, oh, I got to refresh, I got to start again, I got to figure out this healthy eating thing, then you must join me this Friday. It's in Linden Hills. It's a beautiful location. It's a community room which is hosted by Bremer Bank. Beautiful space. I'm going to do a short presentation. By short, I mean anywhere between 15 minutes and half an hour, depending on what kind of questions we have. But I'm also going to be providing coffee and breakfast items. So you can come hungry. You can come hungry to learn more information about what you need to know. But this workshop is called 3 Things Most Diets Miss When It Comes to Health. Because the last thing I want you to do is jump into another diet, especially if you just exited a diet from those New Year's resolutions. I don't want you to jump right into another one without knowing these things that most diets miss. And if you've ever worked with me or had any experience with my programs, I don't do diets. We change how we eat, but we don't do proper diets in the sense of restriction and tracking and all those kinds of things. We take a different approach to things. So this is kind of like a good way to understand how I approach things, to know why these diets don't seem to be working out for you and why you keep trying different types of diets and two-timing on your diets. I say two-timing because we all do that, right? We switch from one diet to the next almost without a break, almost without understanding why we're switching and why it's important for us to first take a moment and pause and reflect on why that previous diet wasn't working out for us. But anyway, it's $15 to attend, so super low cost. I provide the food and beverages. You just provide your lovely, beautiful faces, and we'll get rocking on debunking some of those nutrition myths that you might be hearing these days in the news all the time. Also, another resource that I have listed above this video, because this is National Nutrition Month, and I would be absolutely remiss if I did not offer some sort of special opportunity for you to connect with me. One of the services I provide are weekly meal plans, and these are meal plans that like so many people love them, but they're meal plans that I have tested the recipes in my own kitchen. If I tested it in my kitchen, I didn't like it, or my children hated it, then I don't include it on my meal plans. So this is a good thing to know because everyone's taste is different, but mine are with the filter of things that are easy to cook or don't take a lot of time, not crazy amounts of ingredients or things that you would only eat once and never again, and kid-friendly, because I have 2 kids with very different tastes and preferences, and it's important to me that as a mom, I don't make 15 different kinds of meals for my family. I want us to all eat the same thing. So if that's important to you as well, grab one of my weekly meal plans, which are listed above this video. Use the discount code HALF-OFF. They are 50% off for through the end of this month. So when March ends, that's when the deal ends. They're normally $14. You can get them for only $7. $1 a day, you can get a meal plan, everything prepared for you. There aren't grocery lists, but there's breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. A couple of them might even have some sweeter options, like a dessert type option, a healthy dessert option. So they're definitely worth checking out, even if you're like, well, I don't care about certain health goals, but I do want to change up how I'm eating. I want to incorporate different types of ingredients. These are the meal plans for you. Those are the special announcements I have going on right now. And like I mentioned, because I'm hosting that live workshop this Friday, I will not be doing a live stream on Friday. That's why I'm doing one today. But today's live stream is all about healthy restaurant eating. Raise your hand if you've ever been on a diet or changed how you eat and you can't eat out because there's nothing that you can eat. Or it becomes such a lesson in frustration to identify whether there's anything you can eat that's approved on your diet. I know I've gone through that situation. For example, so I don't look at calories necessarily when it comes to how I eat. Sometimes I do, because a lot of restaurants will divulge the calorie information, whether it's directly on the menu or in a handheld menu for you. So I don't necessarily look at the calories. Sometimes I use that as a barometer if it's the end of the day and I kind of know where I've been eating and where I'm at, but I don't usually look at calories. But sometimes you need to look at other things, like, is there any dairy in here? Is there any gluten? Is there any meat byproducts or something like that? So if you're eating plant-based, you might be more concerned about those kinds of things. You might be concerned about, is there soy in this? Or if you have certain allergies, there's things that you're trying to avoid actively. If you're trying to go low sugar, that can be a big challenge for you to eat out. In fact, I think most websites that I've looked at who focus on sugar-free or reduced sugar say only eat what you cook. So I'm all in support of eating things that you cook at home. You will never suffer from learning how to cook more of your favorite foods at home. Ever, ever, ever. That's always a good plan. You eat, not only do you tend to eat better, but you also tend to save money, which is important for a lot of my clients. So I'm a big fan of learning how to cook meals at home, which is why I have meal plans for you. I'll take that effort out of putting it together for you, and it's up to you to cook it. However, I'm a person who lives in the same world that you do. I have 2 kids. I have scheduled things that come up from time to time and don't necessarily have time to cook or don't have the right ingredients to make what my family tends to enjoy eating. So we will sometimes find ourselves eating at restaurants. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to sit there and watch your family eat because there's nothing you can eat at a restaurant. I'm here to share with you very simple tricks and suggestions for how you can still eat healthy even when you're going to a restaurant. And when I say restaurant, I mean anything that you're not cooking yourself. So it could be anything from like a local deli kind of place to fast food to sit-down fancy places. Any restaurant you tend to go to, they have certain things in common that are helpful for you to know so that you can make the best and most informed choices possible. Before we get started, if you're watching this video either live or on the replay, if you're watching the replay, say hashtag replay in the comments so I can say hi back to you. And let me know, what is a restaurant that you absolutely, and it could be a chain, fast food, whatever, but what is a particular restaurant that you refuse to eat at because it doesn't have anything that is quote unquote healthy? And I put healthy in quotes because we all have different definitions of what healthy looks like. So according to your perspective, what is a restaurant that you avoid at all costs because there's nothing healthy there for you? I'd love to hear your comments about that. I will share one of mine. In particular, when I was eating vegetarian, even before I was eating dairy-free vegetarian, there were no fast food places I could eat at, like zero. Being fully aware that some Mexican places you can have, you know, black bean burrito or something like that. I don't tend to eat refried beans at restaurants or out because they tend to mess up my stomach. I love refried beans. I cannot live without having refried beans, but I tend to eat them from a can because they don't upset my stomach. And I usually get the vegetarian ones from a can because if you go to a restaurant, sometimes they have lard in them, sometimes they have pork or bacon fat in them, which I grew up eating beans that way, but I tend to go for the vegetarian version when I'm buying them from the store. So, and I never make them from scratch because that's a long, involved process, and I just don't. I know how, I just don't do it. So, when I was vegetarian, I very rarely enjoyed going out to eat. When my family was like, let's go out to eat tonight. It's easy, it's quick. I'm like, there's nothing I can eat. So the only place I can think of off the top of my head that wasn't a fancy vegetarian restaurant, because there are plenty of vegetarian restaurants and plant-based restaurants in the Twin Cities area, but my family doesn't like those restaurants because they don't eat the same way that I do. So that was a particular challenge of mine, is finding a place that was a lowest common denominator for all of my family's needs. And my husband enjoys vegetarian food, but that's not his primary go-to. So the only place I found that was quick and easy that my family also tended to like going to for vegetarian was Culver's. believe it or not, Culver's has a decent veggie burger. It's not a Boca. I don't know what kind of burger it is. I think it's like a brown rice slash mushroom-based burger. It's not a bean-based burger. I don't do a lot of bean-based burgers. There's a few that I found that I like, but I tend to prefer the burgers that are made with either mushroom or hearty grains. Soy is not my go-to when it comes to a meat substitute. Soy-based products tend to have a certain texture, which is more like meat, but I don't tend to like those. So I tend to go for the more mushroom, the more umami type of vegetarian burger. And Culver's was one of the few that had a vegetarian burger that I really enjoyed. However, when I was going dairy-free, obviously Culver's is not the thing because they're the butter burger, so I couldn't necessarily get the veggie burger there. Another place that, before I was dairy-free, that would have fit the bill would have been Wendy's, because they have baked potatoes. You know, baked potatoes are not fried, and you can put whatever toppings. You know, obviously, I would avoid the bacon, but they had cheese and sour cream and broccoli, and I can't do chili when you're vegetarian. But there were some options there, limited options. I can certainly put my own toppings on the potato when I got home. So those were the two restaurants that come top of mind to me, but I couldn't eat anywhere else in terms of fast food when I was a vegetarian. So you get really good at these things if you're focusing on a very specific type of eating. But today I'd like to share with you types of ways you can look at menus no matter where you are and no matter what game plan you have in terms of your dietary needs. And before getting started, I'd like to say my particular focus when I work with clients, I help people change their lifestyles without a full-time commitment. So what that means is there are certain steps you can take, and I focus on helping people stop doing everything so they can start doing a few of the right things to move the needle towards their goals. So in this case, if you're like, well, I want to eat healthy, I don't necessarily have the ability, time, energy, knowledge to cook 100% of my meals at home, then this video is just for you. Okay, so let's talk about restaurants for one. Restaurants. They're everywhere. A lot of restaurants are delivering food, Carside to go, Grubhub, where they will deliver to your house. And depending on what kind of restaurants you tend to frequent, there's a whole ambiance involved, right? Restaurants are very strategic in terms of getting their customers to eat more and to linger more. So some of the techniques they use for that, bottomless drinks. The more, if you keep having a drink, you're going to want more food, right? If they just refilled your soda or something, you're probably going to order a dessert because you're like, oh, I got to finish off this soda. You know, we really struggle with leaving things on the table when we leave at a restaurant, especially if it's a higher end restaurant. We want to feel like we're getting our value or linger just because we like the atmosphere. The restaurants tend to have dim lighting, and that's because as humans, biologically, we tend to eat more when it's darker. Did you know that? We tend to eat more when it's darker. So that's one of the reasons why we turn towards comfort food in the wintertime, because it's darker longer during the day, which causes us to crave more foods and to feel hibernation mode, if you will, to conserve our energy, to eat more food. So that's a typical thing that happens biologically during this time of year. And restaurants capitalize on that. That's what they're extravagant at. Let's talk about how many courses you have at a restaurant. Obviously, if we're talking fast food, it's just one and done. But if you're at a restaurant where it's like they have appetizers, they have drinks, they have soup and salad, they have entrees, they have desserts. Sometimes they have an after dessert menu. I mean, they have all sorts of options, right? Slow your roll. You will be tempted to order from each of those things. Here's the thing. It's fine to do that once in a while, but if you eat out a couple of times a week and you are tempted to have an appetizer, a salad, entree, and dessert every time you eat out, and maybe a drink, an adult beverage of some sort, that's 5 things you're eating for one meal. It could be your entire nutrition for the day. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do this once in a while. We all like to be treated well. We all like to get the experience of it, but you don't need that much food. And we know for a fact that restaurant portion quality, restaurant portions have increased approximately 40 to 50% since they started offering restaurants, these types of restaurants, in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, whatever. And more families today are spending more money eating outside of their home than cooking inside of their home. And that's a fact. So restaurants, in order to maximize their profits, what they try to do is they try to offer like a big plate of pasta. When you think about it, like places like Olive Garden will have a all-you-can-eat pasta. That's great. Do you know you can buy a box of pasta for like $2 at the store? And you can make a big plate of pasta, pour some sauce on top of it. You can even make your homemade sauce if you've got a garden or something. But if you made pasta from scratch at home and added your favorite toppings to that, it would be probably 1/3 of the cost of what you would pay to do a bottomless pasta dish at a restaurant. And it might even be tastier because you can put in whatever you want. You know exactly what's going into your food. Restaurants know this, but they also want you to maximize your experience. And if you're like, well, I'm really hungry, because some of us don't eat till we're like starving and our stomach is actually growling and physically trying to digest the food that we don't have in it. Restaurants know this, which is why the waiter will say, can I offer you an appetizer right away? Can I offer you a bread basket? Can I offer you this or that? You're hungry. That's why you're out to eat, right? And if you waited 45 minutes to an hour to get seated, then you might be even more hungry. Sorry, I'm having allergies today. So restaurants will give you the most appealing option, and sometimes that's bottomless or never ending or all you can eat. Those are tricks the restaurant is using, and you do not have to succumb to those tricks. Let's talk about, we mentioned briefly, the environment of the restaurant is setting you up to eat more. We talked about the fact that portions at restaurants are bigger and badder, I guess that's the word, than they have ever been. So knowing these two things, how can we be savvy when we go to a restaurant? And some of these tips will sound very counterintuitive, but they work. First of all, if you're going to have a beverage when you go to a restaurant, make it water. H2O. And if you want to do a fun beverage of some sort, wait. So don't do that before you order your food or when you're waiting for your table or whatever. You may be tempted, and I'm not saying you can't have it, because if you tell yourself you can't have something, you're going to crave it all the more. But tell yourself you can have it after. That's setting up a certain trigger, a certain cue for that habit. So instead of taking a glass of alcohol right when you sit down or even before you sit down, because some restaurants offer that service, don't drink alcohol at all. If you're going to drink anything, drink water. So you know that the first thing they do is they come up to you and they order your beverages for you. And they serve you your beverages. Get water. And then they might say, would you like a bread basket? Or if it's a Mexican place, they might give you a plate of nachos with salsa at the table. I'm looking at you, Chevys. I love Chevys. I love nachos. They're like my trigger food. And that is very challenging for me. But you can tell the waiter right away, or the wait staff. It might be a woman. Sorry, I don't mean to be gender specific here. You could say right away, we don't need the bread basket. We don't need the nachos. Here's why. When I work with clients on meal planning, what I do, the process we follow, it's a 3-step process, super easy, is start with your protein, add your fat in, and finish with a carb. So that's how you know that you don't want those appetizers or that bread basket or that bag of chips on your table, because those are pure carbs. And especially if you have given in to the temptation to have some sort of beverage that's not water. So that's top of a carb. If you got alcohol, that's carbs, so sugar. There might be some fermentation there too. And if you're on an empty stomach, that will make you crave certain foods more than others. So even if you get a soda or a coffee or something, coffee is kind of, there's not a lot of carbs in coffee unless you add sugar and cream and other things to it. But if you order some sort of beverage that's not water, that's a carb. And then if you have the bread basket or the chips, that's another carb. Plus, they tend to refill these things as you go through them, which means it's endless, it's never ending, which means you're going to eat more of them without even thinking about it. And it's really hard to not eat more of those things. especially if you're hungry, especially if you're stressed, especially if your kids are fighting or whatever. It's really hard not to. So don't even allow yourself the possibility of having those things. Order water when you sit down and tell the waiter, oh, no, thank you. I don't need the bread basket. I don't need the whatever, what have you. Next, because we're looking at the courses. I'll go into the fast food section just a little bit after this, but we're looking at courses. So you've passed up those early easy carbs as the bread basket and the chips. You passed out the alcohol because you're going to save that for later. Save it for later. It's a good technique. And now what? Now they're like, oh, would you like a soup or salad? And sometimes a soup or salad is an add-on to your entree. But here's the thing. Soup and salad is great. However, most restaurants will offer a soup that's not terribly healthy. So chicken wild rice. It sounds healthy, right? It's got wild rice in it and it's got chicken. Yeah, but then it's full of a bunch of cream and full of a bunch of other things. Loaded baked potato soup. It's got cheese, it's got bacon, it's got cream. It's so full of calories and a bunch of other things that you don't necessarily need. Not a good choice. Sometimes there's chicken tortilla, which is a clear soup. It's a broth-based soup, which might be a little bit better for you, but it might have things in there that are too spicy for you. The good news is if you do tend to go towards the spicier foods, it cuts your metabolism down a little bit because your body is working so hard to process the spice. So if you do, if you're okay with a bit of spice, I would have you gravitate towards a spicier soup, like a spicy black bean or a spicy chicken tortilla or something like that, as long as it's a clear soup. Soups are good because they add to your liquid component, and usually they have some sort of vegetables. Now here's the temptation. You might say, oh, I'll get the chili. That's great. It's pure protein and a little bit of tomatoes, but there's not a lot of vegetables in there. So if you can, go with a broth-based soup that has a lot of vegetables. So minestrone tends to have a number of vegetables. Clear chicken noodle, even one that doesn't have noodles, like a vegetarian soup, there's usually a couple of them. Sometimes they offer vegan soups. If it's a clear broth and it has at least a couple of different kinds of vegetables, that's a smart thing to do. Try to get the smaller size and not the bowl, because again, it's all about portion control at restaurants. That's the hardest thing. So always gravitate towards the smaller size, especially if you're getting more than one entree or course, if you will. Salad, let's talk about salad. You may be like, well, that's my green, that's my healthy part of my meal, because I'm going to get the steak and potatoes, so salad is my vegetable, which is a great plan. However, if you get the Caesar salad, there's a bunch of things in there that may not be terribly healthy for you. And when I say healthy, I mean they might be adding unnecessary calories to what you're doing and more carbs than you need to be having for your meal. So Caesar salad, like, it has croutons, it has cheese, it has a dressing. So there might be things in that add up the calories very quickly. And I'm just speaking in calories, not because you should care about the calories, but because all these things add up and portion control is out of control when it comes to restaurants. So I would almost have you choose a soup over the salad, because most of the salad options you get are pretty sad. It's some leaves, a tomato or two, and a few cucumbers, maybe some raw onion, and a bunch of add-ons like cheese, croutons, bacon, salad dressing. And unless you're choosing a non-creamy salad dressing, those calories are going to add up quick. So I would hesitate to have you order salad unless your entire meal is soup and salad. Then you're pretty much loading up on your vegetables, which are carbs. And I would encourage you to add some sort of protein source to that, because soup, even if it has little bits of chicken, it's not very high protein. So if that's your entire meal, go at it, enjoy it. Stay away from the really heavily based like creamy sauces and creamy broths, because they add a lot of things that you don't like. Small little fact that you may not be aware of, a lot of salad dressings, in addition to a lot of dairy and added fat, will have a lot of added sugar. Chili actually has quite a bit of sugar because from the tomatoes, which naturally have sugar, but sometimes they add additional sugar to make it a little more palatable. So something to know, if you get tomato basil soup, that's the highest level of sugar you can possibly order of any soup on the menu. So be aware of that. If you're focusing on lower sugar, never get tomato basil soup. It's super sweet. It has a lot of sugar in it. Salad dressings, unless it's a balsamic-based dressing, it's going to have a lot of sugar. Even balsamic dressings can have a lot of sugar, and you don't really, the restaurants are not required to share with you the sugar content of their food. They will share calories, they will share fat, and sometimes they'll share carbs. It just depends on the restaurant and where they display the information. If you have any doubts about what's in the food you're eating at a restaurant, I will pop in the comments below this a calculator with a bunch of popular different chains so you can look up that information. It's a very helpful resource. I always encourage my clients to look at where they're going to be eating ahead of time and strategize what they're going to order so that they don't have to wait till they're there and in the moment, because we tend to make the wrong decisions when we're in the moment. So anytime you can plan ahead, it's helpful. I will pop a calculator down below to identify the restaurants that you might be looking at and you might be frequenting, so you can choose the best choices based on what you're looking for. Let's talk about entrees. Entrees. So entrees usually follow a simple pattern, right? Either it's a big pot of something, like a rice dish, a pasta dish, where it's all thrown together. So it's like some sort of grain, some sort of protein, some sort of vegetables, some sort of sauce. And some of them may not have any vegetables at all, because restaurants have seen enough people turn away their vegetables and say, no, we're not going to offer that. It's a waste of our money, because produce costs more than pasta. Produce always costs more than grains, and restaurants are trying to, make a buck. So, and if they notice their diners are pushing the vegetables to the side, they're going to put more pasta in there because it's cheaper and it's what people are eating. They don't want to throw food away. Why should we? Here's how to look at it. I mentioned earlier that my meal planning process that I work with clients on is you start with your protein, you add in your fat, and then your carbs. So with protein, typically we think of meat. So the steak, the chicken, the lamb, the fish, those are your protein sources. If you're vegetarian, there's plenty of other protein sources like eggs or beans or tofu. Let me think of some other ones. Yeah, I mean, those are pretty much it. You have some other ones too. Cheese. I would never recommend that you choose cheese as your primary protein source for a variety of reasons, but it can get a little heavy. That's one of the main reasons why. So anything beans, anything protein, anything tofu, anything eggs, beans, cheese for your vegetarian sources. And vegan, of course, seitan, tofu, tempeh, things like that. So soy-based proteins usually. Sometimes you can get other substitutes, bean-based ones that are also vegan. Be careful though, because sometimes if you get what appears to be a vegan option, it's actually vegetarian, so it might have something that's not entirely vegan. They might add some dairy for some thickening agent and things like that, so be cautious. And most restaurants are required to share that information on their menu, but always check ahead with the waiter. And the waiter may not know, which is fine, but have them check if it's that important to you, because they can, and they're there to serve you, and you're paying them to serve you, so you might as well get what you're looking for. So start with your protein. That's the easy part. What about the fat? Depending on the restaurant you're going to, they may default to a single type of fat. So for example, if you're at a Mediterranean or Italian place, they might be using olive oil. They might not. They might be using butter. You don't really know what medium they're cooking the food in, and the restaurants are not required to share that information with you. Obviously, if you're vegan, you'll be very concerned about whether they're cooking with butter or oil, because that makes a difference in terms of what you're ordering on the menu. So I'm sure you're doing your due diligence and checking in with the wait staff and finding out what's actually in there. But that's one thing that you have less control over when you eat out. The type of fat they're using, unless it's fried, is less important to you than the fact that they're using some sort of fat, which you know they are, because restaurant food is very tasty. And the reason it's tasty is because it has either sugar or fat in it, or both. So you know they're using some sort of fat. You just don't necessarily know what type of fat. Do your due diligence and see what sort of fat is in it. I would suggest that most restaurants use either lard or butter for their cooking medium. So be aware of that. And know that you have no idea exactly how much fat is in that, but know that it's already in there. And then finishing with the carbs. So a lot of restaurant meals focus on the carbs. There will probably be 70% carbs to 30% protein on your plate. Here's what you can do with that information. That is not the appropriate mix for really focusing on your health, because the more carbs you eat, and you know, if you haven't bypassed the alcohol, if you haven't bypassed the easy carbs in the beginning, or the appetizers, which are usually heavily carb based, then you've already eaten quite a bit of carbs, and you probably don't need to eat any carbs with your entree, unless they're fibrous carbs like vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, green beans, all that sort of thing. So you could even say, pass on the potato and just do your salad, or pass on the, what else do they usually offer? Pasta, and say, can I have an extra helping of broccoli or something like that? So be aware that by the time you get to your entree, you should probably focus on the more fibrous carbs. And by fibrous, I mean they have more fiber. So the greens, the ones that you have to chew really hard to swallow them, you know, that sort of thing. And if it's an all-in-one pasta dish or a rice dish, what you can do is order a side of an additional vegetable, a green vegetable, a fibrous vegetable, and then when the dish comes to you, you can set aside half of the grain on your plate and replace it with your fibrous carb, because that's a better carb for you. Plus, you have rice to eat for the next day, because you know those portions are out of control. So you have 2 meals for the price of 1. And you have a healthier meal to end your day with. The protein is not going to be a concern for you. They always are heavily protein based in most restaurants that I go to, so that's not a concern. A lot of dishes come with bread. Again, you can pass the bread and just go with the fibrous thing. I'm not saying you should avoid bread necessarily. Bread could be your main carb if you want it to be, but I would gravitate towards the other carbs first. Your soup, your vegetable-based soup, your salad, your broccoli, or whatever. A special note for those of you who are like me and don't like most vegetables they serve in restaurants. And I say this with a grain of salt. So I'm a very picky eater. I don't like raw salad, so I almost never order salad. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I enjoy that salad. But there have been maybe 2 salads in my entire life that I've really, really, really enjoyed. So I'm super picky about that. But also, when it comes to the vegetables they serve with your entree, it's steamed. Sometimes it's stir-fried. But here's the thing. I don't like vegetables prepared that way. Just being honest, I don't. So for me, I know texture-wise, I would more likely prefer a vegetable that is cooked along with the grain and the meat. So a stir-fry, something along those lines. Now, cautiously, because if you're doing a stir fry or something where it's all-in-one, you cook it all in one shot, there's probably a lot of sugar in it, because they pour some sort of sauce on it. So either that sauce is heavy in the fat, heavy in the sugar, or heavy in both. So be cautious of that, especially if you're a person who doesn't like the steamed veggies. And usually when it's a veggie medley, it's like carrots and cauliflower, which I hate those 2 vegetables. I'll eat cauliflower, but like on my own terms. So I don't usually order the vegetable medley, because it's usually not the vegetables I enjoy eating. Or it's green beans. I cannot stand green beans, so I will not eat green beans, especially not in a restaurant. They never cook them soft enough for me to actually eat them and enjoy them. So if you know that the types of veggies they serve at that restaurant are no bueno for you, then that's okay. But then default towards the soup, default towards the salad, or default towards other vegetables that you enjoy. Sometimes on the appetizer menu, you can find vegetables. They're doing more of that now because a lot of people are very low carb and more health conscious than they used to be. Sometimes those vegetables are fried, which you kind of have to weigh in the balance. Like, is it worth it to you? At least you're going to get more vegetables, but on your terms, and the vegetable you kind of enjoy having. Sometimes on the appetizer menu is where you'll see Brussels sprouts or asparagus or something that may be a little more interesting or intriguing to you, but that's never a bad idea to see whether they have other vegetables on the appetizer menu that would benefit you, especially if you're not a soup and salad kind of person. That way you can up the veggie content of what you're eating and be more mindful of pushing aside those grains on your plate. Those are some good ways to eat healthier at restaurants. And then let's talk about dessert. You know that question is going to be there, right? Oh, would you like to have a dessert? It's great to have dessert. However, if you've had soup and salad, if you've had an entree, if you've decided to have a drink, a fun, frou-frou, fancy drink, do not get dessert. I like to tell people either choose the fun drink, the fun adult drink, or the dessert, but never choose both, because those calories add up before you know it. And yes, we all like to end the meal with something a little sweet. I mean, I have those moments too. This is where it might be helpful to have a small square of chocolate in your purse. If that's something you absolutely crave at the end of the meal, I get you. Or you could do like a hot beverage, like a tea or a coffee, especially if your family is lingering and still having dessert. Then instead of sadly watching them eat a dessert in front of you and trying very hard to keep your hands together so you don't grab their dessert, you could have something to put in your mouth, whether it's a piece of gum, a small piece of chocolate, or a hot drink. So those are some suggestions. Let's talk quickly about fast food. I know we're at 35 minutes already, and I know you've got a busy day ahead of you. I want to talk about fast food a little bit quickly. So fast food is a very difficult one, but I have been able to successfully eat fast food and still maintain a decent weight in a weight that I feel comfortable at. So it is possible for you. It doesn't mean that you completely need to give up fast food. Certainly there are some considerations. For example, I mentioned earlier when I was vegetarian, the only fast food place I could eat at would be Culver's because they have a veggie burger I enjoy. Now, you might have another situation where you're like, I have to eat gluten-free, or I have to eat dairy-free, or I prefer plant-based foods. That might be a negotiation you have with your family. If you don't have a family, then eat wherever you want to eat, because that's the beauty of being single. But if you have to kind of conglomerate into other people's needs and kind of weigh the pros and cons of things, here's what you need to know. Now, most restaurants or most dietary friendly ways of eating have a website that can point you to places that are dairy-free, vegan, vegetarian, that sort of thing. However, that doesn't mean you're going to like the food that you eat at that place. So I will highly, highly encourage you to scope out the website of the place you'd like to eat ahead of time to see what's available and to make that decision before you grace the doors, the doorway or the entry of that place. Because by the time you get there, you'll decide, oh, it's okay, it's free for all, I'll do whatever. I'll just eat whatever's there. That's never going to be a good decision for you. You're going to probably regret something, if not multiple somethings that are going on there. Sorry, I just noticed my finger is bleeding. No big deal. So here's what you can do. Most fast food places divulge their information on a website, so you can look at calculators for certain things. Now, not all of those calculators are going to share with you anything beyond fat or calories, fat, and sometimes they tell you it's high protein. Yeah. The protein part is easy. Almost any fast food place you're going to go to is heavily based on protein, meat and cheese. So that's never going to be an issue. The issue is how many carbs you add on the side of that. So if you're going to a fast food place, stick to just a sandwich and forget the extras. And like if you're at a place like Wendy's, a burger by itself is not going to set you back too terribly. But don't get the fries and don't get the soda. Just get the burger. If you are feeling hungry enough, just get a salad on the side. A small caution about fast food salads. They're not very good. And they have a lot of add-ons. By add-ons, I mean they'll have heavily fat-based and sugar-based add-ons. So the fat-based might be blue cheese, nuts. Nuts are good, but sometimes they're sugared nuts. Like, what do they call that when they glazed nuts? And then they usually have like a raspberry or a lemon poppy seed dressing. So something sweeter. So be cautious with that dressing. Try to focus on a salad that does have a lot of fruits and vegetables. Usually they have a lot of fruit, but maybe less vegetables. So if you're going to get a salad at, say, Wendy's, just because I like some of the salads at Wendy's, Wendy's is one of the good choices, apparently. It's close to my house, so I've been able to explore the better options on the Wendy's menu. But they have like a chicken apple salad, which is awesome. But, light on the dressing because the dressing is a very sweet dressing. And I don't like blue cheese, so I usually pick out the blue cheese and then I'll put the nuts on. Sometimes you might need to put your own nuts because if you don't want the glazed and the roasted nuts or the special sugar that they put on the nuts, then you can certainly add your own nuts. But be careful on those dressings. Sometimes the salads will be like, oh, there's strawberries and mandarins and all this other stuff. Anything Asian based at fast food chains is full of sugar. So at fast food chains, not at an Asian restaurant. So if you're going low carb or you're very focused on eating less sugar, do not do the Asian inspired dishes because they're full of sugar. The sweet and sour chicken, the sesame teriyaki, those things are full of sugar. So beware, buyer beware with those things. If you are a person who's leaning towards vegetarian and vegan, a lot of the chains that offer like bowls are a good option. Chipotle, Roti, places where you can literally choose what you put in that bowl. In those cases, it's going to be a heavily portion controlled environment for you. So you may need to keep some of that bowl. For example, when I was eating 5 times a day, I would eat at Chipotle, but I would only eat half of the bowl. I would never get the burrito, and I would, put as many veggies in that bad boy as I possibly could, and then I would only eat half of it, make sure I had a top to put on it and cover it while my family was finishing their food. So for you, it may not be necessarily what you're eating, but how much you're eating. You should always be cognizant of how much you're eating. So always order less than you think you need, and you probably won't be dissatisfied because it'll be more than enough. But you have to put the brakes on it at some point. So determine before you start shoveling it in. I'm a very fast eater, so I could literally finish a whole bowl before my family's even halfway done. So be conscious of that and say, I'm going to eat half of this and I'm going to cover it. I'm going to put it in the bag. Out of sight, out of mind. You can do it. But that allows you also to choose what you want to have in it. When I was vegetarian and dairy free, I would go to a place like Roti, which has like mix and match Mediterranean food. But I had to be cautious of, okay, so they have roasted vegetables there. I want the roasted vegetables. They have hummus. Great, that's vegan. But then they had some sauces that had some dairy in it. So I had to become somewhat cautious of that. I'm not gluten-free or anything like that, but choosing the pita over the rice will typically have fewer calories, will be smaller portions than a pita because they'll usually give you multiple pita, whereas the rice is just a scoop of rice. So certain things that to consider. One thing that restaurants, especially fast food restaurants, do not get right, they almost never have vegetables, ever. Like, it's very difficult. Even in their soups, they might have a token carrot or two. It's very difficult to get vegetables in. And that's the biggest challenge you're going to have. So if you're a snack happy kind of person, keeping some vegetables on hand is helpful. Or trying to get a salad, even if some of those salads are sad, like they have a few lettuce leaves and then a bunch of other things. Eat the lettuce leaves, eat the protein, and save the rest for later. You can always make it into a salad at home later. So those are my top tips for how to eat out healthy. Obviously, I don't need to tell you to not eat fried foods. Plenty of fast food places will have an option of the fried versus the non-fried. Like a burger is not fried. Chicken tenders are fried. So if you can default to the burger, it's actually lower calorie. It actually probably has a little bit less fat because it's not absorbing, the meat is not absorbing the fat from the fryer like the chicken would be. So things to consider for that. If you can avoid sauces, if you can avoid cheese, if you can avoid bacon. I know we're obsessed with bacon and cheese in this country, but if you can avoid those things, then you're making it healthier for yourself. Or if you like the taste of those things, but you want to control it a little bit, then put it on the side. Get a packet, and then you get to measure out how much of that you're using. Avoid the add-ons, the fries, the cheese curds, the onion rings, whatever. And always go with water. Seriously, the biggest change you can do for yourself in your life is to always choose water over anything else, no matter where you eat. Whether it's at home, whether it's in a restaurant, whether it's eating out. If you always choose water, you're going to benefit 100% from that. Oh, I never addressed the wine. So like you're at a beautiful restaurant, right? And I said, don't order the wine first. You need to wait. Here's what you're waiting for. Wait until your entree is there to determine if you want to have wine. Here's why. When you have wine or alcohol on an empty stomach, your body metabolizes that differently than if you have wine or alcohol while you're eating your food. There's a temptation to drink more when you're eating because the food is helping that alcohol be absorbed and you're not getting tipsy. But you shouldn't be drinking to get tipsy anyway. But if you wait until your entree is there, then you've probably had some soup and salad or something else. You've had plenty of water, so you know how hungry you are. Sometimes when we feel hungry, it's being thirsty, it's not hunger. So you've already had water, a full glass of water, if not two, before your entree has arrived. That's when you decide whether you want wine. You decide. You don't have to, but you get to decide because you have stacked the cards in your favor already, and you still have plenty of time to enjoy that wine. That's my advice for that. All right, it's already 45 minutes. That is healthy restaurant eating. Don't forget to join me at my live workshop in Minneapolis this Friday at 10 a.m. We are not going to be having a live stream this Friday, but we're going to continue next week with another live stream. I don't know what April's looking like. I have some changes going on in my personal life. I may not be able to do live streams in April, so stay tuned for that. Also, if you are not in the Minneapolis area and you're like, I still like Jen, I still like to connect, these videos have been helpful for me, thank you so much. Share this video if it's helpful. Share this video with your friends if you feel that they could benefit from these tips. And make sure to tell them that they can get 50% off all meal plans through the end of this month using code HALFOFF, and my website link is above there. In the meanwhile, share with me your least favorite restaurant to eat healthy at, and then share with me your tips and your revelations as you've watched this video, because I'd love to hear from you if there's something in particular you're looking for. And that's a good reminder to me too. I will post that calculator I mentioned down below this video. In the meanwhile, enjoy the rest of your week. This is Jenn Espinosa-Goswami. Don't forget to join me next Friday at I think at 9 a.m. for another live stream on a nutrition topic you care about. Vote below this video for specific topics you'd like me to address when it comes to food, eating, nutrition, meal plans. You got it. I will address it. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.